Hello, and welcome to our final rule in 12 Rules for Life by Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. Today we have rule number 12. Pet a cat when you encounter one on the streets. And I know I mentioned in my last video, I thought it was a bit strange because it looked like it was a dog as the art for this chapter. And it turns out I was correct because Peterson goes into talking about his dogs. And that's honestly the first part of this chapter. Page 335, he mentions that he has an American Eskimo, which, those are very cute little dogs, and it reminds me of like a Schipperke. They look kind of similar, but Schipperkes are typically black, and I've always thought about getting one of those types of dogs for myself. My mom had a Schipperke, actually. He was a feisty little guy. I never got to meet him because he died before I was born, but my siblings had to deal with him, and apparently he was pretty feisty. But my mom would always defend him, of course. Always defend the dog. He's a Belgian boat dog, I think she would say. They were bred to help protect ships and stuff. And I don't know. I won't get much into it, but it's just a funny little thought. Okay. Page 337, Peterson's talking about, he says that Tajfel's studies demonstrate two things, that people are social and that people are antisocial, and how people will often favor people in their group who even they just met over people outside of their group. They'll do more for them and expect more from their own group. And I think this can be displayed pretty easily if you're of age, or you don't even have to be of age, but it's easy to see at bars if you're out dancing or you go to like a middle school dance. Don't do that unless you are in middle school or you are the chaperone. I'm not advocating to go to a middle school dance to watch this, but it's pretty easy to watch the circles of people there. People will form a circle, excluding others on the outside, but preserving their connection with people on the inside. So they're being social with the people that they know and their group, and they keep this strong bond. And it's up to people on the outside if they want to break through that bond and enter the circle. And you have to do this. Well, truly, you have to do a dance to try to belong in this new circle. Excuse me, something's in my eye. Okay. But as I was saying, it's up to the person on the outside if they want to enter this new group. They have to try to convince this inner circle that they should also become a member, and the whole group may not like it, but one member may, because usually if you're trying to break into a group, you're targeting a single person that you're trying to court typically. But it's pretty easy to see if you just go outside. And even if you're having like a conversation, if you're on like the subway or something, you can see two people are friends. They'll have a close conversation with each other, but also they can be standoffish and cagey. Remember from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But it's pretty easy to see that in everyday settings, that people are social and antisocial. Okay, page 341. Peterson's talking about his 3-year-old son Julian, and how he would never want to lose his son. He would want him to, would it be better if his son was made of carbon fiber or some strong metal and is indestructible and couldn't be harmed? But that also wouldn't make his son him, and his limitations are what makes Peterson love him. And it reminded me of my mom told me growing up I would have a lot of bruises on my shins or my knees or arms or wherever, and she was so worried to take me to the pediatrician for my checkups because she thought that the pediatrician would think that she was abusing me. But in reality, I was just a kid playing. You fall or you get hurt or whatever, but I was just outside playing, being a kid. And she mentioned this to the pediatrician, and his response was wonderful. He said, if he didn't have these bruises on his legs, I would actually be more concerned. I would think that you're not allowing him to play and to be a kid and do what kids do. They need to go out and explore and try to understand the world and make these mistakes and just have fun, because that's just what kids need to do, and adults need to do that too. But for kids to develop and understand the world, they need to go out and do these things. And there was a quote here. So here we are on page 341. The quote's right in the middle, and it's in the middle of a sentence. And Peterson says, "What can be truly loved about a person is inseparable from their limitations." And I think that's completely true. As I was saying before, he loves Julian, his son, because, well, he's his son, but also because he isn't indestructible, and you truly appreciate something when you lose it, but also you have an understanding that you could lose something and they could be hurt. And so understanding that there's limitations makes that thing precious, and that love even more strong. It's like how you can separate losing something, like the main character dies in the movie, or your best friend dies in real life. Obviously, there's a huge difference between the two, but you also can make a distinction, because the main character in the movie, the limitation is different. You know, they're not truly dying. Well, maybe it could be a documentary, but they're not truly dying. There's some sort of separation there, and you can get over it quite quickly over someone like a human being who truly does have a limitation. Okay. Page 343. Peterson's talking with his clients about, how they're dealing with their husband's cancer, and how there's such, and Peterson's daughter who has that crippling disease and needs a new hip, and all these issues, and how it can be so awful. But in the end, they try to find the beauty in these limitations. Imagine a being who's omniscient and omnipresent and omnipotent, and what they're lacking is limitation. There's nothing left for them to explore and to search for, and there's tragedy, but that's also what makes it wonderful. I mean, my family I lost my Nana to an accident. None of us got to say goodbye. None of us even, there was no way that we knew that this was going to happen. And while it's awful that none of us got to say goodbye, we still, I would not trade anything away for all the experiences that I've had with her, and to never have had her in my life. And it's awful and sad, and we have to recognize these limitations, but it also does make me appreciate her more, and everything that she did for me. And Peterson also talks about, having that strength at the funeral, and maybe you can be a shoulder for someone to cry on. And if you are that strong and that proud person, it will really help others out. And I think that's a good way to go about. But also, that brings up another point. I don't think I mentioned, I forget what page he mentions that on, but there's a story in the Bible about Simon. And Simon is the person that helps carry Jesus's cross when Jesus is on his way to Golgotha, or the mount where he's going to be crucified on. And you don't have to be religious to understand these metaphors. I think that's why Peterson uses them a lot too, because the Bible does have a lot of metaphors or stuff that you need to just, I guess, moral stories. But the moral of this story is that even though Jesus Christ is the literal Son of God, he is God, he still needed somebody else to help him out, which was Simon. You still need someone to help carry your crosses. And while it's good to be strong and to be the proud one, it's okay if you also need someone to help carry your cross too. Always, I learned that story in high school and from one of my teachers, and it's always stuck with me. I've never forgotten it, and I don't know. I really like that one. Okay. Page 345. Okay, we have a quote here. Being of any reasonable sort appears to require limitation. Perhaps this is because being requires becoming, as well as mere static existence. And to become is to become something more, or at least something different. And I enjoy this quote because I like how he says that being requires, well, we're beings, and when we all have these limitations, and to become something, we have to recognize those limitations and overcome them if we can. But we can't always get where we want to go. There's a progression, just like following these rules, and we talked about before about having a goal. You have to break it down into little other goals, so that way you can feel good about yourself along the way and not get too wrapped up in something that drags you down. And so in order to become something, in order for your being to become, you have to and take on that journey. In order to become, you have to become. I know that I think you understand what I'm saying there. If you don't, I apologize. It makes sense in my head. But as a being and we're all required to have these limitations, and in order to become something, we have to engage in that becoming. We have to engage in that journey and to transform and to metamorphosize. Okay. Page 347. It took me a little bit of reading and rereading to understand about Peterson saying that you can't think too much about these horrors in your life and try to make sense of it. And it actually reminded me of the previous, I think it might have been the previous rule, but Peterson talking about the notes from the underground and how the the main character explains that the world is not reasonable. And so if you think about it a lot of the time, it's not going to make any sense. It's stuff, things happen that to good people that are bad, and bad things happen to, good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people. It's not reasonable. It's unreasonable. It's a chaotic world. And if you try to think about it, you'll get lost trying to make sense of it all, because it doesn't make sense. And that's why I think that's why Peterson explains that you shouldn't think about it as much. He says that it leads to inexorably to the abyss. And it didn't work for a lot of these great minds. And that's why he mentions noticing. You take note of things, and you just have to keep moving forward. Just like the Kids Sees Ghost songs, that song Reborn. That one pops into my head a lot of the times too. The hook is like, just keep moving forward. Sometimes you take notice and you have to deal with the things, but you just got to keep moving forward. Okay. Page 351 at the very bottom. People can survive through much pain and loss, but to persevere, they must see the good in being. They lose that, they are truly lost. And I think that's a proper way to approach life. If you're always cynical, I don't think you can ever find the happiness in anything. And that honestly leads me into page 353. I'm going to tie the two together, but he mentions even on the worst of days, if you see a cat and it approaches you and you play with it, and just for those 15 seconds you have that happiness on one of your worst days, honestly, that can make up your day if you truly sit back and just appreciate those 15 seconds of bliss. And it's amazing how human beings can turn things around and try to look on the bright side. It reminds me of the very last episode of the Office, when they're interviewing everyone and they're all saying their last segments, and they go to Creed, and he says something along the lines of, I've traveled a lot in my life and I've been at a lot of different places, but it always amazes me that people can find a place and find these random people, and somehow you find a home. And then he's taken away by the police. But the fact that human beings can always find a home and find everyone likes to talk about, oh, we have a family here, we're not just coworkers at our work or something like that. Like, human beings do have a amazing capability of making anything their home. They have an amazing capability of finding goodness in terrible situations, because if you don't, you are just going to get dragged down, and you won't be able to climb out of that hole. And you just have to keep moving forward, and you need to pet that cat when you see it on the street, because you have to enjoy these little things. There's probably going to be a lot of more bad things than good things, and you just have to deal with them as they come, because I think life can be a beautiful adventure, as Charlie Chaplin says in The Great Dictator. I know I've mentioned that before, and it can be a wonderful adventure, and you just have to keep going on that path of that winding road. And sometimes you'll happen upon water, or you'll see something beautiful, and you appreciate that, and you notice that, and you take note of that. And with that, we've come to our 12th rule of life. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this book club. I guess there's also the coda. I've already read the coda. I think I may go back and make a video on it. But for now, I hope you enjoyed the 12 Rules for Life. I enjoyed covering this book a lot. I haven't decided on my next book. I've had two suggestions from two different friends, which I plan on reading in the future. But I was reminded of a book that I've always wanted to read, which is Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain, who's one of my most favorite people in the world. If when people ask the question, who would you want to have dinner with if you could have dinner with anyone? Anthony Bourdain is mine. Hands down, no questions asked. I would want to have dinner with Anthony Bourdain. And with this, he narrates Kitchen Confidential. And the audiobook, I'm like 9th on the waiting list for an audiobook. I don't know how, but I'm waiting for that to come in. So I think my next book is going to be Kitchen Confidential, and I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna get one audiobook and one physical book, because I do enjoy reading, but since he narrates it, I want to hear his narration. But I think, the next book's probably going to be Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain. I'm not sure when the audiobook will come in, so maybe I will try to squeeze a book in before then. We'll see, maybe like a shorter book. But I hope you enjoyed 12 Rules for Life. I will probably do a video on the coda, and I'll see you next time. Take care, and make sure to pet a cat when you see it on the street.